I like to teach negotiation for a couple reasons. How many people here really like to negotiate? Okay, that's about half the room. How many people don't like to negotiate? Some people, you got to be honest about this. And I think maybe one of the reasons that you don't like to negotiate sometimes is the results that you're getting. That makes some kind of sense? I mean, if you were winning, if you were prevailing, if you had a good feeling every time you negotiated, what would you like to do? More of it, right? So that's kind of the purpose of this class, is to help you think through negotiation, the negotiations you've done, negotiations you're going to be involved in the future, and how you can do them a little bit better. Negotiation is really just a conversation, isn't it? It's a conversation between two or more people with some kind of purpose in mind. It's not just, hi, how are you? That's not a negotiation. But, hi, how are you? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? That may be a negotiation. That may be the first step, right? So we're going to talk a lot about real estate negotiation today. I'm not going to talk about negotiating for coffee or for other things, and we all do that. I know we all negotiate for hotel rooms and different things as we travel around, and that's a little different level than what we're talking about today. When we negotiate in the real estate business, there's a tremendous amount of money on the table sometimes. Even a small negotiation, a negotiation with a tenant, where they talk you out of $25 a month, or you talk them out of $25 a month. That's a lot of money, isn't it? I mean, that's $300 a year. If they stay 4 or 5 years, that can be an awful lot of money. Most of them are bigger than that, aren't they? Most negotiations we get involved in have to deal with buying a piece of property, or financing a piece of property, or selling a piece of property. And if you're thoughtful and think about what your plan is before you negotiate, the outcome is typically better. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is trying to think through the process of negotiation. I'm going to tell you a few stories, the things that have happened, and many of them recently, that have made an impact on me and made an impression on me. If you just negotiate and you don't study the results and you don't think about what you've done, you tend not to get much better at it. Okay? And one reason I continue to teach and write about real estate is I'm a student of the business. I'm still fully invested. I manage all my own property. I've rented 5 houses in the last 3 weeks. I was at a house this morning before I came here. We have a move in today. So, I'm really in the business. And because I'm really in the business, how often do I get to negotiate? All the time. Almost every day there's a negotiation going on at some level, right? Either somebody that's working for you, or somebody you're renting to already, or somebody you want to buy from or borrow from or lend to. There's all sorts of deals out there. So being thoughtful about how you're going to do this and kind of having a process that you go through when you negotiate may help you. So I put together this workbook for you, and it'll kind of go step through these processes we're talking about. And so we'll work together. I don't have a real good feel for how long this class is going to be. I mean, it could be 3 or 4 hours. It could be 2 days, depending on how fast I talk and how many questions you have. We've only had a room for a day, so we're going to try to get it done in a day. But I just tell you that because when you teach a class for the first time, you really don't have a great feel for how long it's going to take you to teach the class. Now, for you folks that have never heard me talk before, you'll want to go back in and backfill a little bit. I've written books. I have other courses that I've recorded. Once a year, I teach a class here in Sarasota where we actually go out in the field, knock on doors, find houses, make offers on them. So it's a hands-on, people call these boot camps now, but I've been teaching them since the 70s. We didn't have boot camps. I was in a boot camp in the 70s. It was a different kind of boot camp. It was kind of push-ups and run boot camp. And you were there too. But what we do is we teach people how to buy real estate, and then I teach people how to manage real estate. I like the managing side. And today we're going to talk about negotiating with tenants, which is an ongoing negotiation, isn't it? Is every conversation you have with a tenant a negotiation? I think it is. And depending on how that goes, it'd make a big difference in your cash flow. If you keep giving away $20 here and $20 there and you have a bunch of tenants, you can give away thousands of dollars a month pretty soon. So by staying on top of your game, by having some specific goals of what you want to accomplish in every negotiation and writing these goals down, then the end results might be better. And if you get better at it and you like it and you continue to improve, then you're going to look for more opportunities to negotiate. And that's really the key, because if you're a good negotiator, you want to negotiate as often as possible. It pays better than probably anything else you can do. Think about that for a second. What do you get paid when you paint your house? Mow the grass, go fix something. That's a pretty low-paying job, isn't it? But when you buy something and you're able to negotiate a price that's below the market, or you borrow some money from somebody, you get some owner financing or even financing from a lender, a commercial lender, and you're able to negotiate an interest rate that's below the market, that's making you thousands and thousands of dollars. And how long does it take for those negotiations? How long is a long negotiation? How many hours is involved in a really long negotiation? Well, a real estate transaction, not a union dispute. A real estate transaction. I mean, are we talking 10, 20, 30 hours? It's generally shorter, isn't it? It's intense, but I mean, a lot of times it's short bursts, isn't it? It's short bursts. You get together with a broker or you get together with a seller for maybe a half hour or an hour. That would be kind of a relatively long meeting for most people. How many people have ever spent several hours with a seller? Who's got the record? Larry, how long? What do you think the longest you've ever spent with a seller is?
5 hours before we ever mentioned the house.
5 hours before you mentioned it. Okay. And now, why did you do that? That's an interesting question. Why did you just spend 5 hours to somebody before you even mentioned the house?
Because he wanted to show me his daughter's business. He wanted to show me the house. He wanted to.
Why did you spend the 5 hours? I can see why he spent them
there.
there.
Know me because I wanted him to carry the paper.
Okay, so you figured if he knew you and trusted you and liked you, you're much more likely to do business that you're going to like.
He was 85 years old.
And he was 85 years old, so he had plenty of time to spend. Yeah. But that's a good story because it's true, isn't it?
Yep.
It's true. A lot of people, and if you know me and you know Larry, you know we both like owner financing. We like owner financing. And the reason I like owner financing is when I started this business, the banks wouldn't touch me. You know, I was fresh out of college. I didn't have any credit to speak of. I didn't have any income to speak of. Yet I was finding deals that I wanted to buy. Well, if you find a house that you want to buy and you don't have any money and you can't borrow money at the bank, what's left? Well, there's two options, I think. You can either go borrow money from somebody else. I could call my friend Dan up and get him to lend me some money, but what's his rate going to look like? Dan, if I just borrowed 50 grand from you today just for a couple of years, what would the rate be?
Maybe
15, 20%, yeah, something low like that, right? Now what's the problem with borrowing money at those rates to buy a piece of real estate that I want to rent? Cash flow. It's not going to work out, is it? So that doesn't really work. I mean, I can't go borrow money on those kind of rates and buy an investment property. Now, if I was going to buy and sell something real fast, or if I thought I was going to buy and sell something real fast, anybody ever had that thought and it didn't pan out? You thought you were going to buy and sell it real fast and you still have it? Yeah, I've got a couple of those. But if you're going to buy and hold something, you can't buy and hold something and pay rates of 10, 15, 20% and make any sense out of the cash flow. It just doesn't work. So my other alternative then is to bring in some kind of partner. I could call Dan up and say, Dan, if you'll put up the money, I'll give you half the profits we make, and if the deal is good enough, that might work. If the deal is good enough, that might work. But that has to be a pretty good deal, doesn't it? Because if I'm giving away half the profits, and that's enough to keep him excited, that's going to be an awful good deal. It's going to be an awful good deal. And if you give away half the profits, are you paying pretty high interest? You think 15% might be cheaper than giving away half the profits? I'll bet you it is in most cases if you made a good deal. But what's the difference between giving up half the profits and paying somebody 15% interest? The monthly cash flow. The monthly cash flow. So if you're starting out, maybe you don't have the option of borrowing money and making payments because you don't have the cash flow to do that. So you end up giving away part of the profits. Well, you make this transition in this business. And the transition is that you get better at what you do if you study your craft, and you start looking for specific opportunities where you can buy something with owner financing. And you think that actually still happens in today's market where sellers will carry owner financing? Yeah, it does. And I really think the opportunities are better when interest rates are low, okay? Because if you give somebody cash today and they put the money in the bank, they don't get much of a return on their money. So you can offer them a lot more. I helped a guy put together a deal this week. He was borrowing somebody some money from a guy, and the guy was talking about 10-year financing. What's the 10-year interest rate right now? If you got a 10-year T-bill, what are they paying on it? 1.6. 1.67. Very good. I told him to offer him 3 times the T-bill rate, which would be how much? 5%. 5%, 5.1%, but call it 5%. Well, is 5% money pretty cheap? If you don't know what you're doing, that may sound expensive, but if you know how to buy real estate and know how to manage real estate, can't you make a pretty nice profit if you can borrow money at 5%? Yeah, I think you can. So by thinking a little bit outside the box and offering people, tempting people with a lot more interest than they can earn in a T-bill or a bank account, you can get sellers to carry financing, and this is an excellent time to do it. So we'll talk a little bit about seller financing today. The main part of the day, though, is going to be talking about strategies, how you can influence people. There's a great book written, and the title of it is Influence. If you haven't read it, I'd recommend it. It's listed in the back of your books. You don't have to write it down. You'll see it in there. But it talks about how to influence people. That's a piece of negotiation, isn't it? You ever been influenced by somebody else? You ever ended up in negotiation and after you finished, you figure out what happened? That's happened to me more than one occasion, you know. But it's good. It's not a bad thing as long as you didn't lose too much money. But it's good to go back and study those transactions and ask yourself the question, okay, what really happened here? Why did I make that bad decision? Why did I make that bad decision? So we're going to talk about the ways that people influence you. And so you can be on your guard and you kind of get a feel for it when it's happening to you and you say, hold on, I learned something about that. I shouldn't get too excited about this deal because I'm doing something that I shouldn't do. I'm paying more money than I should for this particular thing, and there's got to be a reason for that. What is it? And go back and analyze it, and that keeps you from making that mistake. I'm not going to read the welcome and introduction to you, but if you look on page 5, the introduction page talks about some of the qualities that kids have. If you have kids, you know the kids are fairly good negotiators. And we tend to think that the little ones are the best, right? Like the 2- and 3-year-olds, because they just won't let loose of something. They just beat on you till they get it. But as my wife points out, I asked her, what age group you think are the best negotiators? She thought about that. She said about the 12- and 13-year-olds are the best because they become strategic. Okay? They just don't beat on you. They think before they start beating on you, you know. And they give you a big hug and tell you how much they love you, or they do the dishes, or then you know something's up, right? Because then something's about to happen. But so strategic, that's a good word, isn't it? Being strategic when you negotiate. Okay? And I'm not talking about negotiate with family members. I'm going to be talking about negotiating with people that you want to do business with. But being strategic when you negotiate is very important, which means you think about what you want to do before you do it. You know, you actually write it down. You have a written plan of what you want to accomplish, what's important to you, and you try to analyze, try to get in the other person's head, and you do that by asking a bunch of questions. Will people talk to you if you ask them a bunch of questions? Well, most of them will, and most of them will tell you too much. Most of them will talk to you for hours if you just sit there and listen to them. So if you'll learn to listen and ask short questions and get them to open up to you, you can learn a lot about their situation, and then you can be strategic about the kind of offers you make and when you make them and how hard you push. Now, there's different types of people that negotiate in different ways, right? We all know that. There's some people that negotiate because of how they feel. There's other people that are just very analytical. You know, maybe they're engineers and they do everything by the numbers. And the thing that makes the world interesting is these two types of people tend to marry each other. Okay? And when you negotiate to buy a house, who are you negotiating with? Two different personalities, right? Okay? You're negotiating with some person who's just numbers oriented, maybe, looking at the math, and the other one is making decisions based on who they feel. Now, everybody's kind of making the assumption, all the guys are making the assumption, well, I'm the numbers guys, I don't have any feelings, right? As a practical matter, who generally has an ego involved in negotiation? The man or the woman? The guy. The guy who we're thinking, well, maybe he's the numbers guy, but he may be the emotional guy here. He may have his ego involved and see this as some kind of competition. And so you need to recognize that. And when you run up against somebody who has their ego involved and they promised or they've told or bragged to somebody that they're going to sell this house for $150,000, you have to figure out how to get them that $150,000. Maybe not today, but if they can go home and say, I sold my house for $150,000, they probably won't mention that, you know, it's a $2,000 down deal and there's no payments for 3 years. They probably won't share the terms with you, but you can give them the $150,000 if you can get some terms. So you look for that kind of thing. You look for who you're dealing with. Now, is it true that there are some people that you can deal with on a much tougher level than others? Think about that for a second. Are there some people you'll negotiate very hard with? I mean, just make them really low ball offers, not move off your prices, where you wouldn't do that with other people? Who would you be tough with? Who would you be toughest with? Yep.
Banks.
Banks. And why banks?
They're not necessarily emotionally involved. They don't have the sentiment about the property
Okay.
that a private seller may have.
Everybody here, they said banks because they're not emotionally involved. Banks aren't people, are they? Banks aren't people. Banks are institutions. So you're dealing with an employee in an institution, and do they really care? I mean, if there's a great big deal, or maybe they do care. If they've made somebody, I'll tell you where they do care is if you can find a banker who's made a loan, and the loan has gone bad, that banker cares. You know, if they still own the loan in that bank, because they want to solve that problem, don't they? Because his boss is talking to him on a regular basis, or the stockholders are talking to the president on a regular basis about that bad loan. So it can be personal, even at the bank level, it can be personal. Yeah, Jason?
You can negotiate hard with people that you're only going to negotiate with one time.
Mm-hmm. Who would that be? Who would you negotiate with just one time? Me? Think,
Out-of-town seller.
an out-of-town seller, okay. Out-of-town seller, maybe an out-of-town lender, somebody who you think you may never see again. Anybody ever had somebody sneak up on you that you never thought you were going to see again, and you saw them again? So you want to be a little careful with that, you know. It seems like and of course I stick out a little bit, but every place I go, I run across somebody that I know. You know, every place I go, I run across somebody I know. So I'm pretty sensitive to negotiating with people, even if they're out of town, unless, and I like your point, if it's a professional on the other side of the table. And who else other than bankers are professional negotiators? Lawyers, you know, somebody representing. What about real estate brokers? Are they pros? Okay, they shouldn't take this personally, should they? Okay, well, and we have different cultures too. Some people are you know, we have, and the nice thing about the United States is we have people from all over the world live here, right? We have all kinds of cultures live here, and that makes it very interesting. You know, it's not boring at all. But people from different backgrounds will probably negotiate differently. You need to recognize that. Sometimes it's just an issue of space, isn't it? How close they'll get to you. You know, some people are very comfortable being close when they negotiate. Other people want a whole table between them. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Can you make somebody uncomfortable by sitting down right next to them? Yeah, very uncomfortable, right? So you have to be a little sensitive, and especially if you're from a culture where people will sit right next to each other. You know, you want to be sensitive that folks want more space if they're not comfortable. Because if you make somebody uncomfortable, how does that affect the negotiation? If you make them physically uncomfortable, can that go either way? Can they just get up and leave? Get mad at you? Now think about this for a second. Would you rather do business or negotiate with somebody that you like and you're comfortable with, or somebody you don't like and you're not comfortable with? Who would you rather do business with? If everything else is the same, who do you rather do business with? This is easy. This is not a hard question, right? It's somebody you like. It's not a trick question. So here's the key. You don't want to make somebody uncomfortable on purpose, especially right in the beginning, right? Because we're dealing with, you know, if you think about who we're dealing with, people that rent houses from us, people that we buy and sell houses to, people we borrow money from. These are all individuals. They're people. They're not institutions. So because we're dealing with individuals, we want to be very sensitive to how they feel, and we want them comfortable going into negotiation. Because if they're comfortable and they like us and they think, you know, hopefully they think we're honest and we're doing the right thing by them and we have some kind of mutual goal, then the negotiation goes pretty well, and we can ask for things that benefit us and they'll give them to us because we're nice people. So we'll talk a little bit about how to use that nice people part, how to be nice, and how that helps you as we go through today. So kids, they're persistent. They don't take no's. They're able to change their mood in a hurry. Can some adults do that? You know, adults that can change their mood in a hurry? Anybody have any bipolar relatives other than me? And they're persistent. They're persistent. Persistence is a really high quality, isn't it? Anybody known any really good real estate salesmen in your career? I think one quality that most really good real estate salesmen have is they're persistent. You know, when they find somebody who they're pretty sure is going to buy a house or they're pretty sure it's going to sell a house, they will pester them to death until they do one of those two things. And because I've watched a real killer salesman work, they just won't leave them alone. And eventually people will either buy or sell from them or to them. Why? Get rid of them. And it's not that they're making a bad deal. They just want that to move on. You know, they know they're not going away. They figure out they're not going away, so they'll do business with them. And they do it in a nice way. These people they're not mean people. They're nice people. They're friendly people. They're just always there, you know, and you just want to make them disappear at some point. Down at the bottom, we say a negotiator is not just somebody who's really quick on their feet. You know, if you're quick on your feet, if you think quickly, if you have fast retorts when people say things to you, that's not necessarily a good trait for a negotiator. Okay? Would you rather hire an attorney to represent you in court who's really quick, or somebody who prepares really well for the trial? I think I'll go after the preparation side. I want somebody to spend hours and hours and days thinking about this case before it shows up, not somebody to show up and then open the file and try to do a good job, you know. And I think negotiation is like that. I think the more time you have time to prepare, and now the nice thing about what we do is we tend to get involved in the same types of negotiations over and over again. I mean, if you've been managing tenants for years and years and years, and a tenant calls you, you've probably heard this conversation before, haven't you? You probably have had the same problem before, and hopefully you've learned from how you resolved it last time, and you know how to resolve it this time. So you get better at this because you're doing a lot of the same negotiations over and over again. And people that are really good negotiators do that, don't they? Folks that sell cars, are they pretty good? They get to practice a lot? Every day, all day long, right? So you develop, if you're smart, you develop the right skills here in doing that. So you should become a really good negotiator, not at all things. I mean, you're probably not going to settle some union dispute, but at negotiating with tenants, at negotiating with buyers and sellers, at negotiating with lenders. And if you can master, you know, how to do that better and just improve a little bit every time you negotiate, you'll make a little bit of money, a ton of money over the long term. Page 7 secrets of successful negotiators. Number 1, they avoid emotional involvement in the escalation that comes with it. You don't want to make it personal. And a lot of people do make it personal, right? And they make it personal to get some kind of reaction out of you. And we'll talk about how to deal with difficult negotiators later in the class. But if somebody yells at you or gets in your face or beats on the table or slams the door, what are they trying to do? Trying to get you to change, right? They're trying to get you to give them more money or do something different. So it's an act they're putting on to get you to react in some ways. And we'll talk about how to react to that, but the best way to react to most emotional, outbursts like that is just to be as quiet as you can, and they'll calm down eventually. But that's not the emotion that normally gets you. You see that coming. You recognize that, don't you? If somebody's beating on the table, you say, well, this guy just, you're doing this on purpose. The ones that get you are the ones that are much more subtle, okay? The people that are really nice to you. Somebody who buys you a cup of coffee. Somebody does you a favor early in the negotiation. Or somebody has real problems. It's a real sad case. You run into people in the real estate business on a regular basis that have serious problems, right? They're behind in their payments. Their kids are sick. Their spouses left them. And when you run into a situation like that, what emotion are we dealing with? How would you feel? You run across some young parent and the kids are sick and the house is in foreclosure and spouse is left. How do you feel?
Compassion.
Yeah, you want to help them, don't you? And if you want to help them, how does that affect how you negotiate?
Weaken.
It's different, isn't it? But that's a different emotion than somebody beating on the table and yelling at you. But all of it counts, doesn't it? So the trick is not to just ignore it. You're going to have emotional reactions, and that's okay. We're all emotional people. But when you have that emotional reaction, you just need to step back and say, okay, is this emotion that I'm feeling causing me to pay more for this property, causing me to put more down, causing me to make more monthly payments? Because if it is, you need to back off and say, I had a lady that I ran across that fit all those categories here not long ago. And so I back off and I say, okay, I really feel sorry for this person. She's had a rough life. Things have been going bad. How sorry do I feel? how big a check will I write her and just give it to her as a gift? Now, if you just met somebody, okay, you didn't raise them, you're not related to them, and you just ran across them on the street, they've got a sign up that says, lost my job, need money for my kids, how big a check are you going to write them? Anybody going to write them a $10,000 check? No, but could you pay them $10,000 too much for their house if you're not careful? The answer is you could. You could, because your mind works differently when we start thinking about different numbers, right? $175,000 house, $10,000 doesn't seem very big next to $175,000, does it? But will you write somebody a check for $10,000 that you don't know? The answer is no, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that. So you have to be careful when you run across somebody who has problems, and you'll see that all the time in this business. Don't we, in fact, seek out people that have problems? I mean, if you're out buying real estate, isn't that part of what you're doing? You're looking for somebody who really wants to make a deal, so they have some kind of problem. You just want to make sure that your emotions don't get you writing that $10,000 check, because you wouldn't write that $10,000 check normally. Okay? But you give it away because you pay too much money or you'll pay too much a month. And do some people use something like that on purpose, use that emotion on purpose to get you to pay too much? Can you imagine somebody would tell you a sad story just to get you to pay too much money? Yes, they would. Yes, they would. So, if you find yourself, you can't avoid being emotional, but when you find yourself being emotional for some reason about a deal, you just need to back off and say, okay, what's causing this? Am I making a good business deal here? Now, if you're married, how can you get some very good feedback? Who might give you some feedback if you're married and you get excited about a deal? Your spouse, right? And I've always said, if you've listened to me talk, if you can't explain to your spouse why this is a good deal, you shouldn't buy it. Okay? How we're going to make money on this deal. If you can't explain how we're going to make money on this deal, you shouldn't buy it. And I guarantee you, your spouse will straighten you out if you say, well, I just feel sorry for these people. That's not how we make money. You know, if you feel sorry for them, you write a check. And maybe you write a check to Salvation Army and they'll take care of these folks, but be careful about that. Number 2 here. They research fully before the beginning. Now, it's hard to do in some cases. Sometimes people want to sell you something in a hurry. When you're a buyer, can you slow deals down? When you're buying a piece of real estate, can you slow it down?
Sometimes.
I think you can. Now, people will try to get you to speed up, and if somebody's trying to get you to speed up and say, look, we're leaving town. If you don't buy it right now, somebody else is going to buy it. What are they trying to do? They're trying to get you to move fast, right? Is there a reason they're trying to get you to move fast? Yeah, and maybe you're paying too much money. So you want to consciously, again, recognize that, slow it down a little bit, and at least have some minimum research you're going to do, right? If I would sell you a house in Sarasota for $17,000, that sounds like an awful good price, but shouldn't you question it? If I'd sell you a Rolex watch for $500, that sounds like a good price. Shouldn't you question that? Sure. When things are really cheap, and isn't this the way people get suckered sometimes? When things are really cheap, you have a tendency to say, you know, you have mixed emotions, right? You say, man, I really want that. It's really cheap, but it could be something wrong. It could be stolen. You know, maybe these people don't own the house. Maybe there's something wrong with the house we don't know about. And that's common sense stuff. So you should slow it down. Now, one reason I buy with owner financing is if somebody's leaving town and I buy their house and give them $100 down and owe them the rest, do I have much at risk? No. So I can make that deal pretty fast, but the deal that would make me very nervous is somebody is leaving town and they're going to sell me a $200,000 house for $100,000, but it has to be all cash and it has to be today. Yeah, right? Okay, that sounds like a really good deal. I want that one. I want that 50 cents on the dollar purchase. You don't see many of those, but if I have to pay them today, man, could something be wrong? Yeah, something could be wrong. So, you know, we won't go into a litany of we could spend all day listing all the things that could go wrong with that deal, but it could be physical, it could be someone on the property, it could be a title problem, it could be fraud, it could be all sorts of stuff, but you want to slow things down. What are a couple things you want to be able to do before you ever buy a piece of real estate? What's one important thing? You want to make sure you're buying it from who? People that own it, okay? And that's why we have all this title insurance and the whole bit with title works. So if you're new to the business and don't understand all that, you want to probably, a good course to take is a course that real estate salesmen and brokers take, because it teaches you a little bit about title law and contract law. But you want to make sure you're buying from somebody who really owns the property. Now, many times more than one person owns a property. And this is something you'll see in negotiating all the time. If two people buy the property and one person won't sign, what do you have? You don't have a deal, do you? Don't have a deal. And many times when you're negotiating, we were buying property one time, and there were three of us involved, and one of them got out and walked out of the deal. Well, when that happens, the other two can't buy without the third one. Now, this actually was a selling deal. The other two can't sell without the third one. If three people sign or are on the deed, it takes three signatures on that deed to sell the property, doesn't it? So now you have three different negotiations you're doing. So people will play games with you a little bit that way, because could they stage that? Could they stage it where one person would just intentionally walk out of the deal? Sure. And that may make you do what? May make you want to pay more money to get this person back. So you look for techniques like that. But my point was, you research before you make an offer. You make sure you're dealing with the owners. So you ask questions. How do you find out who the owners are? Well, you can just ask. Most people will tell you. Can you look it up on the internet? Sure. Get a copy of a deed, get a copy of title insurance policy, so you can get some documentation and make sure you're dealing with the real owners. And if their name is John Smith, that poses a little dilemma. Yeah, there's a lot of John Smiths out there. So you want to make sure it's the right John Smith. Would that make you nervous that there's a John Smith that was selling you a house for $200, and he's selling it to you for $100, and his name was John Smith, and it said John Smith on the deed? It should make you nervous. You want to make sure it's the right John Smith, right? So little things like that, you want to do the research. And of course you want to research the value of the property, what kind of rents it'll produce. And you should be able to answer the question, if I buy this house, if these people say yes to my offer, how am I going to make money? And if you can't answer that question and don't have a good answer to that question, you're making a wrong offer in the house. Okay? You shouldn't do that. Number three, they have a game plan. Know what you want. Listen to what the other person wants. We'll talk a little bit more about that. They choose when and where to negotiate. Do you have some control over when and where you negotiate? You do. You don't have to show up, right? You can postpone it. You can choose the place. You can choose where you sit. And if you'll do this kind of consciously, you can either make yourself very comfortable, or you can make the other party very comfortable, depending on what your game plan is. Okay? If you want to make the other party very comfortable, you give them a good chair. You don't have the light shining in their eyes. It's the right temperature. If you want to make them uncomfortable, what do? I won't tell you who this is, but I got a friend who's a CPA, and he's got a special office when the IRS comes to do audits. Okay? And there's a duck phone on this desk, and there's an old wood army desk. Remember those little old wood army desks? And there's a hardwood chair, and it's in the back of his office, and there's no air conditioning, so it's always about 95 degrees back there. And every time the phone rings, the duck quacks. Every time. It's a duck phone. It quacks. That's what it does. So his phone rings probably every 3 or 4 times an hour, and it quack, 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 quack. He lets it ring for a while. You know? Now, is he trying to make this guy comfortable or uncomfortable? Uncomfortable. But people will do that, right? And in negotiations, people do that too. They put you in the wrong chair. We had a guy one time you see people do funny things, but some people will saw the legs off their chairs, so the chair you're sitting in is real short, and they'll raise their chair up in the air where they look real tall. Well, I had some guys who were friends of mine. This guy had done that as a routine, so he had them in the short chairs. He was in the tall chair, but the guy in the tall chair was a pretty short guy. And they'd been in his office many times, and he had this big black leather chair, real fancy chair, and he had to kind of hop to get up in it. He left the office, and they waxed the chair. So the next time he hopped to get up in it, he slid right under the desk. He had to be there. They learn to look at negotiation from the other party's point of view, number 5 here on page 7. From the other party's point of view, they get in the head of the seller and said, if I were these people, what would I be interested in? What do I need? And sometimes it's money, but often there's needs other than money. In the house business, people need a place to live, don't they? Sometimes they need relief from cash flow. They've got cash flow they can't afford. Sometimes they don't want to maintain a house. Sometimes they don't want to manage a house. So if you can ask a bit, talk to these folks for a while, get in their head and figure out what they need out of the transaction. If it's just money, if it's a bank and it's just money, that may be different. But a bank may have other needs too. They may have management needs that they may need to move fast. The bank may need to get something off their books right away. Number 6, they know the worst possible result of the negotiation and have other alternatives. If I don't rent a house to this particular tenant, is that the end of the world? No. What'll probably happen sometime in the next couple of days? Somebody else might want to rent a house. Okay. So, but have you ever found yourself really wanting to rent a house to a particular tenant? Maybe because you're leaving town next week and you don't want the house to sit empty for a week. Maybe you just really like these people. Now, why would you really like somebody? Because they're working hard to make a good impression on you, right? Isn't that probably the reason? I mean, they're saying all the right things. They're good. They're good. My friend Jack Miller used to kid about kids. He said, if people show up in my office with kids and they want to rent a house and the kids are dressed in little suits, he says, I know those aren't real kids. They either rented them and brought them in, or they told the kids, don't move, just you know. So you're looking for normal people. But people will do strange things, won't they? And people renting houses, won't they do strange things? Yeah, they really will go out of the way to talk you into renting them a house. They'll tell you every story you want to hear. You know, if you let them know what you want, like if we're looking for a long-term tenant, they'll start playing that game. They'll say, well, we want to stay here 15 years. And they always say we want to fix the house up, right? I love them the ones who say that you won't even recognize it when we move out. That's often the case. It's often the case. Yeah, that's right. But know the worst possible result. And I tend to exaggerate. You know, if I have somebody who wants to buy a house and they walk away, I say, oh man, I lost that one. Or if I'm trying to buy a house and I can't buy it, sometimes I'll work too hard trying to buy a house. And all these things are things you need to guard against. I mean, some negotiations do take a long time. I mean, some negotiations take a year. I've been watching one house for 2 years. I haven't bought it yet. I still hope to buy that house. So sometimes it takes a long time to close a transaction. But on the other hand, if you find yourself wanting something too much, what do you tend to do? You go overpay for it. So and the key is not exactly what you pay, but did you pay more than what it's really worth? Did you exaggerate the value? And you start justifying things in your mind if you're not careful. And number 7, they know when to close the deal. They know when to quit talking and close the deal. So we're going to show you how to get that done in this class. So do I have an advantage? So the advantage might be that you have a negotiating advantage. What else? What other advantage might you have? Cash. Okay. You may have resources that the other person doesn't have. Okay. What else? Time. You may have all the time in the world, and that's a big advantage, isn't it? And don't we want to negotiate with somebody who has a time issue on the other side? I mean, in an ideal situation, we'll establish what their deadline is, and we'll negotiate right up to that deadline, won't we? Because that's where we get a big advantage. So time could be on our side. Anything else?
You don't need what they have.
You don't need what they have, and that's real important. If you think about different types of transactions, if you're renting a house, you really need the first tenant that comes along? No, because aren't there a lot of tenants? Now, if your house is priced appropriately in good shape, there should be a lot of tenants. So if you lose the first tenant, that's not a big deal, right? But if that house is in the school district that they want, and in the neighborhood that they want, and it's the right size for them, and the right price for them, how many houses like that where there'll be?
Only that one.
Maybe only that one. So if the only house that works for them is your house, but you don't need them, who has the advantage? You do. You have a significant advantage, don't you? Okay? So think through deals like that to determine who has the advantage, and when you have the advantage, what do you get to do? You get to ask for a little bit more, don't you? You get to ask for a little bit more. And you should win a negotiation. We'll talk about negotiating specifically with tenants. And I'll say if you can't out-negotiate your tenants, you shouldn't rent to them, right? You don't want to rent to people who can out-negotiate you, because there's going to be a long adventure. You know, tenants may stay with you 5 or 10 years, and if they keep winning, it could cost you a lot of money over 5 or 10 years. So you want to make sure that you do negotiate people that you can out-negotiate. And this is not just because you're bigger and stronger. This is because you have something they want more, and you don't really care if you rent to them, because there's a lot of people that you can rent to. Okay? So the person who cares the least about the results of the transaction has more power, don't they? The person that cares the least about the end results of the transaction has more power. So if you don't care, You've got the power. And when you've got the power, you get to play a little game here. You get to maybe ask for a little bit more money a month, or ask for a bigger deposit, or ask for a longer term, or ask them to do some work, or a lot of things. So you don't have to give in at all. Number 2 is the person I am negotiating with likely to make a concession. The person I'm negotiating with likely to make a concession. Who is likely to make a concession? How can you tell this?
Ask.
Let's talk about buying a house for a second. If I'm buying a house from somebody, who's more likely to make me a good deal on price? Somebody that bought a house 5 years ago for $150, now they're trying to sell it for $175, or somebody bought a house 30 years ago for $25, and now they're trying to sell it for $175.
Longest time involved.
Somebody bought one a long time ago, right? Now, why are they more likely to make me a good deal on a price? They have a lot more room. Right? If you had a house that you've owned for 20 or 30 years and you go to sell it, you think you might be easy to deal with? You paid $30 for something, now it's worth $175. The guy offers you $165, and you feel, I want to get rid of this house anyway, close enough. See yourself making that kind of decision? Now, if you bought the house for $165, would you sell it for $165? Same house. Probably wouldn't, would you? Probably hold out for the $175, but that's what it's really worth, is $175. But my point is, there are some people who are much more likely to make a concession, and you are too. You're more likely to make a concession when you're in that position. And I've noticed this about myself. When I go to buy things, I'm a pretty tough buyer. I try to get a good price, good terms. I really work hard when I buy things. But after I've owned it 30 years, I'm a pussycat on the other side, because you paid just a little bit of money for it, and actually your mind really starts working. You say, when I bought that house, I only put $5,000 down, and now it's worth $250,000. I've only got $5,000 in it. So isn't it easy to give away $5,000 or $10,000 here going out? And it's not because of the value of the house, is it? It's because of the way you think about it, the way your mind works. So you're looking for people who are more likely to make you a concession on the other side, aren't you? Okay? Same thing with lenders. If somebody's got a whole bunch of money and they're trying to get rid of it, aren't they more likely to make you a good deal? Now, we haven't seen banks in that position for a while, but do you remember, and do you think there'll be a time again when commercial lenders, their marching orders will be make a bunch of loans? I think so, because we've gone through those cycles before. So, have you ever had bankers call you trying to get you to borrow money? Some of you old people probably remember this. Yeah, it happens, right? So we go through cycles here. And when somebody has money in the bank, they're a private investor, or a bank, an institution, has a ton of cash sitting around and they need to lend it, there's opportunity there for you to make a concession. So if you ask for something, you get better deals there. Number 3, if so, is the amount of the concession worth my time and effort? You can go down and negotiate for a gallon of milk, but how much money can you make negotiating for a gallon of milk? I guess if you take the old milk, you might get a quarter off or something. But how long are you going to spend to get a quarter? When you negotiate with real estate, now we're talking about significant money. And you should set a minimum, I think. Depending on what you're buying, where you're buying, your experience, you should have some minimum target every time you buy a piece of real estate. And ours has changed over the years. When I first started, I'd buy a piece of real estate for a $2,000 or $3,000 profit, just a little bit under the market. And over the years, we've raised that to 10 and 20, but you should have a target. And if you're just starting, don't set that target too high, because if you set a goal of buying things $20,000 under the market and you're buying a $120,000 house, that's tough. You've got to work hard to do that, and you may go 2 years and not buy something. You're better off doing a little volume, aren't you? You're better off buying more. You're better off negotiating more often and honing your skills than you are hitting your head up against the wall and not buying anything for several years. So is the concession worth your time and effort? Have that minimum target when you buy. How will winning this negotiation affect my future relationship with this person or organization? Or will it? We had somebody talk about maybe you buy something from an out-of-state owner. You may never see those people again. Okay? If you're buying from a bank or an attorney, if you're buying from a local attorney, you probably will do business. You might do business again. There's a lot of attorneys, so maybe not. But if you're dealing with a professional and you negotiate from strength, how will they feel about that? You think you'll get more respect from a lender or a lawyer if you negotiate from strength, you negotiate hard, or if you just kind of a pushover? I think from strength. And I get a different reaction, especially think about banks for a second. If I go into a lender, or any lender, could be a private lender too, and I ask them for permission to take over a loan, what are they going to say to me? No, probably not so much. But if I say, look, you've got a loan that's non-performing, I'll take it over if you'll forgive the back payments, you'll forgive all the late fees, you'll re-amortize any cost you have, any legal fees in here, and you'll spread the loan out over 10 more years and lower the interest rate 2%. It's a different approach, isn't it? And now I'm going at them, and I'm a professional. I'm asking for a different result than just asking to take over the loan. So these two different approaches you get different reactions. And the same thing's true with a lawyer. I think the same thing's true with a seller. Sellers are a little more sensitive. So when I'm dealing with somebody, what's up? If somebody's trying to sell their own house, what do you think the number one quality they're looking for in somebody making an offer?
Ability to close.
I think you're right on. He said ability to close. They probably had a half a dozen. If you're trying to sell your own house, you put a for sale by owner sign in the front yard. Will people stop and talk to you? You ever will people get excited about your house? People tell you they like your house, and then what happens? They never come back. They never come back. I've had guys that work for me a lot doing different repair jobs, and they'll call me all the time to be excited. Say, "Oh, somebody just looked at the house. I know they're going to take it." They never come back, right? So people get excited, or people will tell you they like your house. I mean, they're trying to befriend you, but they don't come back. Well, it's very frustrating, isn't it? And if you're trying to sell your own house, and a half a dozen people say, "Oh, we love your house," and none of them ever show up, none of them ever make you an offer, or maybe they make you an offer and they don't close, it just kind of wears you out after a while. Yeah, Larry.
Going back to number 3.
Yeah.
You said you have a minimum profit target.
Mm-hmm.
You're a whole long-term guy.
I am.
So are you looking at dollars, or are you looking at minimum cash flow? Because not everybody has the same. Some people want to do quick turns, other people want to make
Yeah.
cash.
Larry's question is how do I set my minimum profit when I buy a house? I look at it in terms of liquidity. Okay. I want to be sure that I can sell this house to somebody else and get my money back. Now, so that does take in consideration both sides of this. If I'm able to negotiate owner financing and I'm able to get really good terms, then I know I can sell this house to somebody else, right? So if the last house I bought with owner financing, the lady carried back a loan of 4% for 10 years. Well, 4% for 10 years, payments are $400 a month on a house that rents for $895. I know I can sell that house to somebody else in this market in a heartbeat, because people want that kind of rate. Okay, that's what they can't get. So the financing itself makes that deal attractive. But I also look at the price, and if I have to put more cash down in the deal, and that was a deal with a very small cash down payment, if I have to put more cash down in any kind of purchase, the more cash I have involved in it, the less liquid I am, right? Because liquidity is cash. So if I have to write a check for $50,000 to buy a house, now I'm asking this question: can I sell this house to somebody else in a hurry? Not in 6 months, but in a hurry. Maybe call up you and sell you that house and get my $50,000 back. And if I can call up Larry and get my $50,000 back, I know you're not going to pay me too much, right? You're a wholesale buyer. So what price do I have to give another wholesale buyer and get my money back is my question. So it's not just a flat answer for you, but I hope that helps you. I want to be able to get rid of the house. I always want to feel whatever I buy that I can get rid of it and get my money back in a hurry, selling it to somebody else on a wholesale level. Now, retail, that's a whole different deal. I'm going to make a nice profit on a retail basis, but I want to be able to get my money back. So that's my minimum below the market. And it changes with the market, doesn't it? When the market's hot, that's a little different number than when the market's soft, but markets change. And so the longer you stay around, you say, I'm going to be a little more cautious now because market could change again. It could go the other way, and I won't be able to get back out again. It just makes you a little more cautious. Yes, sir. Okay, we're talking about number 4. So you may have two interests. You may have an interest in the outcome of the negotiation, it's true, but you may have an interest in your relationship with the other party. If you're dealing with contractors doing work for you on a regular basis, okay, you want fair prices, but do some people push them too hard? Yeah, and if you push a contractor too hard, what's likely to happen? They either won't show up, or they won't finish a job, or they use the wrong materials, and it's going to even out at some point. Okay, so people you're going to do business with, and lenders are like this. I have people that invest money with me on a regular basis. I have to be very careful about how I treat these folks because it's an ongoing relationship. It's a long-term relationship. That doesn't mean we can't negotiate. We do negotiate, but it has to be to our mutual interest. We've had people reduce interest rates for us, but it's to our mutual interest because if I give them the cash back right now, if I just pay their loan off, what kind of rate are they going to get in the bank? Very low, right? So if I pay them 4 instead of 6 for a while, 4 is still a lot better than they're getting in the bank. And if it's for a short period of time, I mean, they don't want to make me a 4% loan for 20 years. Nobody would do that. But if it's for 1 year or 2 years, that makes more sense than having it in the bank at a lower rate. So it's to our mutual advantage to have rates that make some kind of sense. One of my first investors, the guy who loaned me a ton of money for years, and he would never, even when rates are high, he would never charge me more than 9%. I said, Joe, why don't you charge? I said, I'm willing to pay 12. He says, yeah, but I want to make sure, number one, that you stay in business because you're a really good customer. I borrowed a lot of money from him. We do deals over and over again. So is it in his best interest that I both stay in business and pay him back? Yeah, so he'd rather be a little bit on the low side. And he said, I never want to put you in a situation where you're going to lose money on a deal. You want every deal to work. So you have to be careful when you're involved with other folks, especially on an ongoing relationship, to maintain a relationship. If so, is it likely to cost me more in the future than I'll gain today? So, if you make a really tough deal with somebody today, be it a lender, and probably not a one-time seller, but it could be a tenant. If you make a tough deal with a tenant, is that likely to come back and bite you? I think so. You might have an advantage over a tenant where you can get them to raise the rent or do something else, but in the long term, if they're going to stay with you 5 or 10 years, it evens out. Somebody had a hand up, Debbie?
This is a hot button for me. My handyman died, and he was a daily rate the best guy known to mankind. So now I'm on the Craigslist trying to find handymen, and I find oftentimes that they want gold. They want every dollar that they've ever made in my life off of my deal, And I tell them, I'd love to do long-term business with you. Please give me a fair price. And I kind of know what things should be, but typically they'll go a big price, and I want to use them for forever. And I feel sometimes that if I negotiate a whole lot, I'm afraid I'm going to get lesser quality or something. I don't know these people. And I tell them, please give me a good price, and, I don't want to negotiate or something, but I don't know how to negotiate in terms of these new people. And, I want to establish that long-term person that I can go to, but can you say something about that?
Yeah, I think you have to negotiate toward common purpose by saying something like this. And say, look, this needs to be fair for both of us if you want to do more work for me. And I'd like you to do more for me because I like the quality of your work. Okay? And if you have somebody you like the quality of their work, they do good quality work, they do it on time, those are things that are important to you. Now, the price is important to you, but the quality of work is very important to you, right? And the ability to have somebody do a job without supervising them, that's very important to you, because if you have to go follow up on every job that gets done, that's going to wear you out. So I would talk in terms, not so much of price, but those qualities. This is to our mutual benefit. If you can bring a job in on time, if you can do quality work where we don't have callbacks, if I don't have to follow up on you, now we can have a long-term relationship, and I can pay you a fair amount, but I'm going to bid you against other people. There are other people in this line of work, and it's probably, I've always found that it's better to find somebody, how to say this, probably, they're going to be the busiest people are the people you want to hire. Now, the problem that these busy people have is they can do this work, but there's more than just doing work to that business. What's the other piece of that business after they do all the work? Getting paid. So what can you do for them other than paying them more money? You can say, look, I can't afford to pay you more than everybody else, but one thing I can do is when you get finished with the job is I can pay you sooner. I won't make you wait 3 weeks for your money or a month for your money. Okay? And that's a major benefit to somebody who's in the work, because most of these guys, I mean, I had lunch yesterday with a guy who's in the road building business. So, we have to wait months for our checks sometimes. Well, that's a big deal. So getting paid on time. So rather than fighting over the money side so much, fight over those issues. And I think you might be able to come to some kind of agreement. And the last question here under discovery, which isn't even on your page, so you have to write this one down, is what will each side lose if we can't reach an agreement? Because both sides lose something. Take Debbie's example right there. What will her handyman lose if they can't reach some kind of agreement? Well, not just work, because he can get work other places, right? He's probably not going to be short of work if he knows what he's doing. But what does he lose? What does he lose in Debbie? He loses somebody who's consistent, maybe, okay? And maybe you have the kind of work that he really likes. I don't know, but maybe you've got decent houses and it's pretty clean work. But what you're getting is somebody who's financially responsible who will pay on time, okay? And if he's doing work for 10 different people or 20 different people, he's got issues collecting. You just know that. So that's a big benefit to him. What would you lose? Well, there are other handymen out there. What you really pick up if you can stick with one person on a regular basis is it's just easier for you. You can make one phone call, it's more consistent, you don't have to follow up, quality of work. But put that in perspective so you don't get too excited about this, because if you paid enough, I mean, it's sort of like plumbers, right? If you pay enough, you can hire a big plumbing company and they will show up 24 hours a day. If you're hiring some guy to do plumbing work for you who's kind of doing it on the side, already has a full-time job as a plumber, it'll be a lot cheaper, but he may not show up as much. So the same type of thing. Okay? So figure out what you both have to lose, and if you don't reach an agreement, and that kind of brings you together sometimes. Page 10, strategy. Setting standards, your standards, and discovering the standards the other party is using. Which of your standards is non-negotiable? See if you can read through this list and see if there's anything on this list that's non-negotiable for you. Maybe everything is negotiable. If you're going to be in the same business in the same town for a long period of time, is your reputation important to you? I think so. I've been in the same town my whole life. I don't plan on going anyplace. I plan on staying here the rest of my life. So the reputation, how I do business with other people, how I treat them, that's pretty important to me. And so the honesty aspect of being as straight a shooter as you can. You make mistakes. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. But if you make a mistake, you correct it. If you tell somebody something that's not quite right, you apologize, you tell them the truth, you get it straightened out. But by doing that kind of business, by being have a reputation of being honest, doing things legally, you attract business that wants to do it the same way. Are there crooks in town? Sure, every town, right? There are people who are dishonest, that do business dishonestly, who don't pay taxes, do a lot of stuff under the table, and those people probably know each other. I mean, I don't know. They probably know each other, and they probably do a lot of business with each other. Well, you probably don't want to do a lot of business in that area. You want to do business with people who have the same standards that you do, of honesty, of doing business legally, not under the table. I knew this guy one time, and he was very smart. I used to play chess with him, very good chess player. But the guy could not do a straight business deal to save his life. There had to be a kink in it, and he had to be some cash going under the table, or something weird had to happen on every deal. And I said to him, if you would just play straight, you'd have 3 times as much money. Because if you don't play it straight, if you're always doing something to kind of hide something, it's hard to grow beyond a certain point. Really hard to grow beyond a certain point. So having a legitimate business, playing straight, playing by the rules, and I've always told the kids, I say, it's a lot more fun to win when you play by the rules. You can cheat and win, right? You can cheat and win. But if you play by the rules and win, you really feel good about that. It's a real win this time. So dealing with other people that have the same standards, or dealing with the same standards you are, is very important, I think. In this fairness part, not overreaching. In Debbie's example, if the guy won't play, if he says, no, I'm going to charge you this much money, or I won't do the work for you, and he's charging way too much. He's charging you $40 an hour instead of $25 an hour, whatever the number is. Well, at some point you say, well, that's just not fair. just not fair. Most of you, or some of you probably know my good friend Jim Napier. And old Jim, when he negotiated, he uses that word fair a lot. You know, he would look right at you and says, "Is that fair?" And make you think through that, you know. And that is a pretty good negotiating ploy, I think, is to get people to think about whether or not that's fair for both sides, and especially if somebody's charging too much. A court might reverse an agreement where one party took unfair advantage of another. That'd be a pretty good defense. If you got into a really bad deal and you wanted to get out of it, you go to the judge and say, "I just didn't understand this deal." You think the judge might let you out? Possible. It is a defense. So when you negotiate a real estate deal, we're going to talk about form here in a bit, but we're going to write it down, aren't we? Okay? And because you're going to write it down, can the judge read it? And because you wrote it down and the judge can read it, it's going to be pretty obvious what the deal really was. And if you take unfair advantage of somebody, how could you actually do that? How could you take unfair advantage of somebody? If you bought a house that's worth $200 for $100, and these people had lived there for 50 years and they were both 100 years old, and you think the kids might show up and say, "You bought mom and dad's house too cheap"? Sure. So you want to be, when you get in a position like that, you just have to be sensitive that you're putting together a deal that'll kind of withstand the test of fairness if it gets in front of a judge, okay? Now, I won't say I don't think, I have never been in front of a judge to enforce a contract one side or the other, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But if I got in front of a judge, I wouldn't want the issue to be overreaching. You know, I wouldn't want the issue to be that I took advantage of somebody, because the judge might look me up on the internet. People ever do that to you, look you up on the internet? I think everybody I've rented to in the last couple of years always comes in and says, "I see you teach seminars." You know, they always look you up on the internet before they show up, don't they? So there's not a lot of privacy here. And if you've done a lot of business and you can get in front of a judge and they know that you've done a lot of business, and the other person has only sold one house in their lifetime, how's that going to look? Not going to look good for you, right? So you want to be careful not to overreach. So if you're ever buying from somebody and you're concerned about their either competency to make a good deal or whether or not they understand it, how can you deal with that? Well, I'm buying a house from somebody and I'm not sure they understand the deal. How can I document that they really understand this deal? Well, we're going to make them sign it, but one step further, you're going down the right road here. What else could they do? They could write it down. If they write the deal down in their own handwriting and say, "Here's the deal. I'm going to sell John a house for $100,000. I know it's worth more than that. He told me it was worth more than that, but we need to sell it right now, so I'm going to sell it to him cheap," and they sign their name. Well, that's better, isn't it? Because it sounds like we've talked about this and they had some idea. So when you get in a position where you're not sure, now I've had people show up in my office and say, "I want you to witness that these people are competent to sell me a house." And I said, "I don't know that they're competent to sell you a house, you know." So if you're dealing with somebody and that's 100 years old, competency is a big issue, right? You want to make sure that they are competent. And can you be 40 years old and incompetent? Sure, I know people like that. So you can be nuts at any age, can't you? So if somebody is incompetent, they sign a contract, the contract's no good.
You know, I do that in my, any distressed property.
Yes, sir.
I've got a section in my purchase agreement where I make them write it out.
Larry says he makes them write out something in his contracts, which is just real good form,
Yes,
because it slows you down too a little bit. And it makes sure that as long as there's full disclosure and everybody understands the deal, are they happy with the deal generally that day? They are. They get dissatisfied maybe a year or two down the road. And that's when it comes back and gets you. So you want to have something, and that's why we write it down, right? You want to have something in writing that will survive at this transaction that you can keep in your file. So if somebody does come back, talk about tenants. When do you have a dispute with tenants often? Anybody ever try to return a security deposit not in full, like part of it? The tenants get excited sometimes. So how can you help dissolve that situation? Document it. Document it. So if I'm giving a tenant back half a security deposit, not the whole thing, I'm not just going to just send them a check for half of it. I'm going to write them a letter and explain why I'm holding it back, because that's required by law. Then I'm going to send them receipts on what we spent it on and say, because I had to paint, because I had to replace this carpet, because, give them reasons that I took the deposit. That diffuses it, because now it's in writing. And if he does go to attorney and goes to court, I'm going to win. And I've never gone to court on that either. Question?
Documenting it with photographs as well.
Good.
You can email them and.
Sure. Pictures are a wonderful thing, aren't they? iPhones or all these phones with cameras on them, that's a wonderful. I don't want to endorse any particular phone, you understand, on tape, but phones are a good thing. Because phones have cameras. That'll date this course. Now, time we record this course again, we probably won't have phones with cameras. We'll really have cameras in our heads or something, on our earrings. It's going to be different.
We're doing a walkthrough video when they first move in that shows the condition and let them tell the camera how wonderful everything is.
Good point. Good point.
Works really well when they tell you that the house was trash when they moved in.
Yeah. Larry says have a video when they move in. My friend Jack Miller used to walk around with a camera and he'd take pictures. If you knew Jack, he's a little thrifty, so he would never put film in the camera. But because he had a flash attachment though, and the flash would go off every time he pushed the button, so they thought they were taking pictures. And just the thought that somebody's either recording you or taking pictures, that slows down 99% of the people, doesn't it? Because they think. The problem I'd have if I took somebody's film and they had had this video, I'd lose it in 5 years before they moved out. I would have no idea where I put that video, so it wouldn't do me any good at all. But if you can keep that stuff, that's wonderful. I still have my 8-track tapes, though, so I do have. I have moved into this generation. I want you to know that. So the last thing here, and we talked a little bit about this, but if you negotiate too hard a deal, if you make too good a deal, no matter what it is, people tend to, often people time to just back out. They just won't close. They just won't show up. They just walk away and say, do what you need to do, but we're not doing that. So you have to, part of this strategy is knowing what deal you want, what deal is good enough for you, what deal they're likely to make. Write all that down before you get started. Then you've got something to negotiate against. Which things are negotiable? The amount of leverage, which is power, that you have, that you can use. And part of that is taking it all versus leaving some on the table. Okay? Now, when are you going to make a deal where you just try to negotiate the best possible price you can make? You're going to take everything you can out of this transaction. Who would you be negotiating against with that kind of offer? Bank. Somebody you're never going to see again. Somebody is a non-person, is an entity. What about the government? Would you negotiate with the government that way? Yeah. Will the government negotiate with you that way? Yeah. If you ever get involved with the IRS, do you think they care about all the nice things you've done in your life? I don't think so. The letters they write, the money they try to extract have nothing to do with you, right? Nothing to do with your personality or character or anything else. They're just looking at numbers. So when you're dealing with just numbers on the other side, then you can deal hard. In fact, when I'm dealing with banks, I always play a little game with myself. I take the lowest offer that I think they would possibly take, which is an offer I'm very happy with, and I knock another 20% off of it. And sometimes they say, okay. Well, you knock another 20% off and they say, okay, you feel pretty smart. I really expect them to come back and negotiate price with me, but sometimes they just say, okay. You never know who you're dealing with on the other side, do you? You never know what their situation is. You don't know if the banker, the bank president came in that day, or the head of the mortgage loan department came in that day and says, take any offers you can get. We need cash today. Sell them, wholesale them, just get rid of these loans. You just don't know who's on the other side. So when you're dealing with an entity, and you have no feel for how they're going to react to this, especially when it's not a person, it's an entity, you make these lowball offers, take it or leave it type offers, because many times they just take it. There's a stunning statistic to me, and that is about a third of the people that buy cars off a car lot pay the full list price. They just pay the sticker price. No, that's a statistic. Okay, let me give you another statistic if you believe that one. 47% of all statistics are made up. Okay? And I made that one up, but I did read that someplace. And I think that's true. I think about a third of the people that buy cars just pay the sticker price, don't you? I mean, I see people nodding their heads. I've read that someplace, and I'm sure that's true. Because some people just don't like this confrontation. And that's why the guys, remember they came out a couple of years ago with just, our sticker price is all you have to buy. You never have to negotiate, just pay the sticker price. Oh boy, all those people went over there, they like that. Well, they're paying too much, aren't they? Because they will take less. And it's funny that when you're negotiating against a car dealer, can you make a car dealer mad? Can you insult a car dealer? I don't think so. It's like insulting a banker. This is almost impossible to do. So, you go in and offer them $5,000 for the $30,000 car. They won't take it personally, will they? They'll laugh, but they're not going to take it personally. It's a game for them because it's not their car. Same thing with the banker. Yes, ma'am.
Would those be like REOs or like short sales that you do those offers to?
The question is, when you're dealing with banks, would it be like an REO or a short sale? And the answer is yes. Or it could be a property that they have a loan on. You want to buy their loan from them. Banks, when banks buy other banks, and you see that happening, you'll see a bank fail in your community sometimes, and another bank will come in and buy the assets. And that's why the FDIC doesn't have to worry about his insurance thing too much, because most of the time another bank will take over the assets and all the accounts will be safe. They buy those loans, especially the non-performing loans, at a discount, don't they? I mean, if a bank has a non-performing loan on their books, say it's a $100,000 loan, when a new bank buys that loan, they don't pay them $100,000 for it. And I don't know exactly what they pay them, but I know it's a lot less than $100,000, maybe $10,000 or $20,000, and it may be in stock, not cash. So they make really good deals when they buy another bank. And that's why when banks come out of these recessions, typically the big banks come out stronger than ever, because what have they done? They've gobbled up the little banks, and they've gobbled them up cheap. They bought things cheap. They got leases cheap. They did a lot of things right. So when you're negotiating with the banks, no matter what kind of offer you're making to them, you can be very tough. Now, the exception might be your local banker, and you know this guy personally, but again, it's business, isn't it? There's a difference between business and personalities. There's no personality involved here. I'm not worried about insulting even the guys I know in the banking business, because they're professionals. They're not going to take it personally.